Hello and welcome. Happy Thursday or Friday, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to our little corner of the internet of YouTube. So please say hello. I'd love to know who is here. I'm going to give this a few seconds or so before I really get started, so we can just kind of, for those of you who are here already, we can just kind of settle in together, breathe together, relax a little bit, kind of just bring your awareness to the space that you're in, that we're in together, letting any of that stuff that was going on right before you joined, it'll be there when we're done, so you can just leave it to the side for now. Hello. Oh, thank you. Cece, I think is what it is. Hello. Welcome. So happy to connect with you all. I know it's kind of a hectic time, so thank you for creating this space to join me today. And I hope you also see it as kind of being very intentional about creating space for yourself. Whether that's coming here to feel connected, taking a break from whatever was going on in your day or your night, allowing yourself to kind of be held in this space that we're sharing together. Whatever it is, just letting yourself really acknowledge and honor that you've created this opportunity, that you've carved out this time and this space for you. And that's a good thing, even if you might feel a little guilty about it, if you might feel like you should be doing something else. There's a chance, if you're actually watching this, that there probably isn't anything else that really, really needs your attention right now. So take a breath, let that kind of settle in for a moment, that this is probably exactly where you need to be, where your heart and your soul desire for you to be, even if it's just about giving yourself a little bit of time. So, hello everybody. Finland, UK. It's so incredible to see people from different parts of the world join us, especially when we're live. So thank you all for being here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of this time of year and what may be coming up, and just kind of how to make sure that you're taking care of yourself over this time. So in particular, I identified boundaries. Boundaries are always something that most of us can struggle with at times, and this time of year especially. And even though we may have less expectation, or people may have less expectation of us in terms of traveling or spending time together, that can kind of bring up a whole set of other issues. So I'll kind of be talking a little bit about some of that. But for right now, let's just kind of settle in together. Let's create an opportunity to put everything else away for a moment, well, several moments while we're here together, and just reconnect with yourself, reconnecting within your body, in your heart, and in your mind, but not in your mind from everything that you have to do, everything that you're worried about, but connecting in your mind to what is real, what is true, in particular the truth of your own being. So not the perception of your truth, of who you believe you are, or what you are worthy of, or who you should or shouldn't be, but seeing the truth of who you are with an acceptance, with a really deep sense of accepting that, even with imperfections, flaws, the things that you may be able to improve upon. Because we are all a work in progress. We all have things that we can improve upon. There's also a lot within each of us that is perfectly okay the way that it is, the way that we are. So settling into this space together, keeping that in mind, that each person here is imperfect, and that within that imperfection, because of that imperfection, that is what really can allow us to deeply connect with one another. Because when we realize that none of us are perfect, then the mask that we wear, the facade that we create when we interact, when we show up in the world, we realize that we don't actually need that. So in this space, this is an opportunity to really try to connect with that truth. So if it feels comfortable to you, maybe closing your eyes and imagining. I know that you don't know the other people who are here, but just kind of closing your eyes and imagining. It says that there are 13 of us here right now. So imagining that we are all kind of sitting in circle together, and that we are all here for the same reason. We all have an awareness of our perfect imperfections. We all have an awareness that we struggle emotionally in some way, maybe with trauma, maybe with more kind of typical types of struggles that people have. And feeling imperfect is one of them. But knowing that in this space, we are all kind of on equal footing, that we are all challenged in some ways. And that within that, that's what allows us to feel connected, to feel supported, to feel that we are a part of something, that we are not as isolated as we may sometimes feel. So imagining in that circle that we are all able to connect to that space within ourselves and with the people across from us. This truth, this reality of this type of connection is always available. So even after today, being able to think about that, whether you're around people or you're just thinking about energetically being connected to other people who you may have a lot more in common with than what you might realize. So letting yourself take a breath, you don't have to force it, but just making sure that you're breathing, noticing the rise and fall of your chest. Noticing any place in your body where you might feel some tension or some pain. And just as you breathe in, imagine a warm light moving through your body into those spaces. And as you exhale, releasing any tension or pain. And on your next inhalation, imagining that light coming into your chest area, into your heart space, kind of swirling around, And that same energy is connecting to each person who is listening right now. That includes if you're watching this on replay. We often can feel very alone on any particular day. This time of year can feel a little bit more isolating, even if you're surrounded by people. And this year is bringing even more challenges in that regard. But even when we are physically alone, or when we feel emotionally very isolated, there are always people out there who are feeling the same, who are struggling in similar ways, who are desiring the same things that you desire. So know that you're not alone. Just feeling your body release any tension, making sure that when you exhale, maybe letting your shoulders release a little bit down your back, unclenching your jaw. Decreasing any tension in your face, letting your forehead relax. Maybe letting your hands open, letting your hips relax a little bit. And then when you're ready, if it feels helpful to you, maybe exhaling with a sigh through your mouth, or just gently exhaling through your nose. And then you can come back. So please feel free to leave any questions that you have really about anything. But again, today we're talking a little bit about boundaries, relationships, and honoring where you're at. So any questions, feel free to share them. So as I was saying, this time of year generally can be challenging. Boundaries are often a struggle during this time, both in honoring what your own boundaries are, being able to recognize what they are, feeling confident in being able to honor them, and in saying no, and even sometimes saying yes to certain things. So one of the most important things in being able to honor your own boundaries is being able to really recognize and honor what it is that you want, what you need. And those are two separate things sometimes, and sometimes they're the same. But being able to honor that is important, because if you're not able to really honor that, then you're never going to have the confidence to be able to say no, to kind of put parameters around your time or availability in terms of what you want to show up for or don't. And so what I mean by honoring yourself in that is being okay, reminding yourself that whatever you want, whatever you need is okay, even if you can't have it in that particular moment. So if you are a caretaker, for example, and you are trying to connect with what you need, what you desire, you may say to yourself, what I really need, what I really want right now is to not have to take care of anybody. Well, depending on your circumstance, that may not be possible right now. But that doesn't mean that it's not okay for you to want it or need it. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't want it or need it. Doesn't mean that you're bad for wanting it or needing it. And whether you're a caretaker professionally or you're a caretaker for somebody that you care about or somebody in your family, somebody that you've taken on the responsibility to care for, but you can honor that desire, that need, and still do the thing that you kind of have to do. But honoring it is noticing that it's there, recognizing that that desire is there, that need is there and not being met, and being able to say that it's okay that it's there without trying to talk yourself out of it, without telling yourself, oh, you shouldn't feel this way, or feel guilty because you feel that way. It's important to be able to really honor that and let yourself know that it's okay that you feel what you feel. And also then being able to recognize, this is what I really feel like I want or need right now, but right now this is what I have to do. Working on whether it's something you truly have to do or something you feel or believe that you have to do. Is it more like a should? That takes a little bit more work, but that is doable as well. But it does take more work for sure. And it's kind of a little bit of a process that you have to do. Part of it is healing, part of it is awareness, but that can happen with a little bit of work. But for now, it's really just about being able to really honor where you're at. And if it's, so again, in this example, if you really desire to have some time to yourself, if you really need, maybe you're not feeling well, maybe you're feeling really exhausted, having that awareness that that's what you really want or need can then give you an opportunity to kind of do the things that are important for you to be able to do to take care of yourself. So if you still have to go do that thing, or maybe you have kids and you have to take care of the kids, but you really just want some time to yourself, if you can acknowledge that that's where you're at and not feel guilty about it, then you can create some time or opportunities to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, kind of filling that cup back up, so to speak. So you can still do the things that you kind of have to do or need to do, but then you're also creating the opportunities to take care of yourself. Maybe you do a 5-minute meditation. Maybe you take a little bit longer in the morning in your shower just to give yourself some peace, some space to breathe, to listen to some music. But if you're not mindful of that, or if you feel guilty for wanting time away, then you're going to rush through the shower and go do all the things that you feel like you need to do, completely ignoring and even dishonoring yourself. So that simple act of just acknowledging that can give you a few moments here or there to take care of yourself. Maybe you get to bed a little bit earlier instead of scrolling through social media. If you're mindful, you can then make different choices. Because when we're not mindful, we do the same things that we're used to doing because it's habit. We don't even think about it. We just notice we've been on our phones for an hour scrolling through social media or watching YouTube videos or whatever it might be. And if that feels nurturing to you, then that's great. But the reality is, much of the time, it doesn't really leave us feeling nourished. In fact, we might even feel more stressed because we feel like, oh my God, I just spent an hour doing this and I have all this other stuff to do. So being mindful of that is really important. If there are situations, I know that I've heard a few people have shared this with me. So this holiday season is obviously a little different than previous holiday seasons for all of us, I think, in this lifetime. And you know, the general consensus among experts, doctors, scientists, is to not travel, to not be in big groups of people, to still social distance. And I know that some people are feeling pressure, whether they're feeling it from the other person or within themselves. I should do this. Uh, there is kind of some pressure to engage in that, to be around people because somebody's asked you or invited you. And maybe they don't think it's a big deal, but maybe you feel like it's not safe and it's not something that you really want to do, and maybe struggling with being able to say no. So this is something that a lot of people are kind of struggling with right now. Anytime that you feel like you don't want to do something, it's important to be able to really check in with yourself and honor that. With this particular situation at this time, it's even more important because we're not just talking about feelings or even being triggered or traumatized, which obviously is really significant. But the reality is that this time can be a lot more impactful um, in lots of ways. So it is important to be mindful of that and honor yourself. One thing that you might consider if this is a situation that you're faced with is that if somebody's asking you to engage in a group gathering, then it's clear that from their perspective, it's not a big deal, or there's nothing really to worry about. And if you're feeling like, no, that doesn't really feel safe, that doesn't really make a lot of sense right now, or whatever, and you're feeling badly about that, you're feeling like they're going to think something about you, or you're feeling like they're going to be hurt that you're not coming or whatever, something you might consider is, first of all, it's okay to feel how you feel. And if that's how you're feeling, then you're aligned with what the experts are actually suggesting. So I think that's an important thing to be able to keep in mind. But the other thing I think that's also important to keep in mind, and this kind of can go along with boundaries in general, is that somebody asking you to do something that they may know that you're not comfortable with, or maybe you said, I'm not really sure I'm comfortable with that, but they're kind of trying to talk you into doing it. And you're left feeling guilty about it. But I would encourage you to think about how loving is it? How compassionate is it of that person who is asking you to do something that is potentially harmful? How compassionate is it of that person? Again, even just in general times, if you're not comfortable doing something, how compassionate is it of that person to try to coax you into doing that? So I think that's just important to consider, kind of flipping that around a little bit. If you happen to be the person who's hosting a gathering and you're asking people to come, don't take it personally. You can't take it personally. Everybody is dealing with this in their own way. And some of us, some people who maybe are hosting a gathering, are dealing with it by wanting to just go on with their lives, not wanting to be controlled by something that, in a sense, may not seem as significant as other people may think that it is. So whatever side we happen to be on when it comes to a desire or a need, ultimately we have to honor where we're at, because other people may have a different idea. Other people are going to work towards honoring their own needs and desires. So being able to recognize first and foremost, what is it that I want? What is it that I need? And then also being mindful that even if you can't have or experience what you want or need right now doesn't mean that you're not deserving of that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that, and I know you've heard me talk about this many times, but we need to be connected. We need to feel connected. And we can only truly be connected if we're feeling connected. And of course, with everything happening, it has been even easier to feel disconnected or isolated. So if you are practicing social distancing, if you're practicing safety in not going out, not being around other people, obviously that can create more of a sense of isolation, especially if you live on your own. So it is even more important to be connected, and being able to be intentional about creating opportunities to be connected is really important. So if you're not going to be around people over the holidays, being really intentional about making sure that you're connecting energetically with people that you feel a connection to, people that you feel are supportive of you, that you enjoy communicating with. And while doing like a video chat is great, and I would definitely encourage that, it doesn't have to be that. If we are mindful when we're doing it, it can actually be something, even chatting over text messaging. Now, ideally, yes, I think being able to see one another, there's a deeper connection often that can happen with that. And we do need to be able to see people too. So just doing text messaging is not certainly ideal, but it doesn't have to be solely getting on video with somebody else or a group of people. It can be even a group messaging situation. But the idea is that when you come into it, that you're fully present with it, that you're reminding yourself who these people are for you in your life. You're reminding yourself of how it feels to share space with them, how it feels to hug them, how it feels to be supported by them or supporting them. Letting yourself really feel in your body what that connection, what that support, what that love feels like, instead of just mindlessly chatting back and forth. Really feeling that. And that really is important this year, no matter what your circumstances, even if you're going to be spending time with people. This is a really challenging time. Whether you celebrate a holiday right now or not, much of the world is celebrating whatever that might look like. And when everybody around you is engaged in something and you're not, it can reinforce that sense of loneliness and isolation. But know that you're not alone. Everybody is struggling with this in some ways. And I would also really encourage you to think about the people, the person that you do have in your life, that even if you can't be with them, that you've had moments where you have been able to really deeply laugh with them, when you have been able to feel truly held in their presence, when you've been able to, even if just briefly, remove that mask and allow yourself to be seen by them. Let yourself really reflect on those moments and feel that connection. You know, when I was kind of guiding you through that exercise, and I talked about kind of imagining the people here together and energetically feeling that, and the light coming into your heart space. as you think about that person or those people in your life, letting yourself really try to feel that energy in your heart space. Letting yourself take a few breaths with that warmth, that light, that energy present. And if at any time it starts to feel difficult in some way, that's okay. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Just means that there's some emotion that's there, and it's important to honor that. So if you feel something coming up, let yourself feel it. Let yourself honor where you're at and just notice, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling uncertain, whatever it is you might be feeling. I'm feeling grief. Just honor whatever it is. And if you don't know what you're feeling, that's okay too. Just, I'm really feeling a lot right now and I don't know what it is. Honoring that in that moment is a healing moment. No matter what's going on, no matter what you may or may not need to heal from, being able to do that in that moment is healing. So if that comes up, if it becomes kind of challenging and isn't feeling good, like a connection, honoring where you're at and what you're needing, you can try it again. But if that doesn't feel okay, then you can move away from it. But the most important thing in that kind of moment is self-compassion for where you're at in that moment. Being able to just really honor that. Because if you beat yourself up about it, if you try to force it, then you're creating more disconnection. You're creating more judgment for yourself, which is going to move you further away from where we're trying to get you. Self-compassion in those moments is so incredibly important. So, honoring what you're feeling, what you're needing, thinking about those moments in your life where you've had that sense of feeling connected and supported, maybe even loved. Recognizing what you need, what you want, and honoring that. I talked about honoring that even if you can't have it, but maybe there are some things that you want or need that are available to you, but maybe might feel a little challenging to try to make happen. Many of the things that we desire in life require a little bit of pushing out of our comfort zone, require a little bit of risk. So be mindful of that. Just because it might feel a little bit uncomfortable doesn't mean that we should stop it. And sometimes what we want or need is available to us if we're able to shift out of thinking that we can't have it, or we shouldn't want it, or that we're not deserving of it, even if just for a moment. So I think that that's really the majority of what I wanted to cover. So I'm going to go through and look at comments and see if there's any questions to answer. So if you do have any, please feel free to share. Marion, this is a really common, unfortunately, common kind of thing. Your last part of that overreaction, I don't think so. So I'm going to read this just in case somebody missed it. My dad talks with my abuser and tells her that I am fine. He doesn't understand why I don't like that, though he knows how difficult she is. I just don't answer him anymore to set a boundary. Overreaction? So no, I actually don't think it's an overreaction. I think that when you have somehow made it clear whether that you don't like him sharing stuff with her or that you don't want to hear about it, and he continues to do it, you've been clear about what that boundary is for you. If he is not honoring that, the reality is that from a healthy perspective, that is an important boundary to be able to set. For if you are being healthy, if you are honoring yourself, that is something that really is an important boundary to be able to set, and just either not responding, blocking, or every time that he might say something, just being able to say, I'm not going to talk to you about this, and just kind of continuing to repeat that, but just not responding, I think, is also completely reasonable. And some version of this is something, unfortunately, that I think pretty much everybody struggles with, and it feels much more, it can, I guess I should say, it can feel much more hurtful when it is a close family member, because there feels the level of betrayal with that can feel, well, it's just more of a betrayal. So it's not just that it can feel that way, but it literally is. Yes, you're not crazy. The reality is there are people in our lives who do not, who will not honor our boundaries. Sometimes they will not, because there's natural pushback when we try to set boundaries. So it can just take a lot of reinforcement of that boundary before they get it. And sometimes it does shift over time if we can be really rooted in what our boundary is and not kind of waver and kind of allow things at times and then sometimes not. Kind of like with parenting, the more consistent you are, the more that rule is going to be understood. But sometimes there are people that just are not willing to be respectful of that boundary. And I know I've mentioned this before, and it is still coming, but I do have a boundaries course that will be released relatively soon, I think, I hope. But I talk about some of that, and there's some exercises to help work on some of that as well. So stay tuned, that will be coming soon. Yes, Michelle says, for many years I have felt family pressure to spend Christmas in the house where I was abused. This year, because of lockdown rules, I can spend it alone with my partner, and this is a huge relief. I have heard this from so many people. And that, it's nice to be able to feel that kind of freedom, to not feel the pressure to do it, to actually have to go and do it, to not feel guilty about it. But if there is a sense of relief in that, which makes sense that there would be, that's a very, very clear indication that you're not honoring yourself in those other years. And maybe this can be the thing, there's a word I'm looking for, I can't find it right now, but this can be the thing that kind of moves you in the direction of recognizing just how different it feels to not have to face that, and then being able to work towards realizing that that's a boundary that you need to set for yourself going forward, that isn't something that feels okay to you. And it's not easy to do that, but that's why working on boundaries is so important. And working on boundaries can look a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be the course that I have, Sacred Boundaries. There's books and stuff like that you can read, but part of it is healing. A big part of being able to set and enforce boundaries is healing all the things that keep you from being able to do that. But really, for anybody, if you have noticed feeling a sense of relief that having to not be around people has given you, because you don't have to see certain people, or you don't have to see them as often, or you don't have to spend time with them or go to their home or whatever it might be, that's a really, really, really big indicator that There's something important for you to honor within yourself about what you need and what you desire, and not just around the holiday. I'm older, working with a fertility clinic. My first pregnancy ended on 11/19 with a miscarriage of my triplets. Again, I'm so sorry, Sharon. This is so fresh. And the holidays are such a difficult time when you've experienced a recent loss. Feeling a bit rushed to move forward on my fertility journey and try again. This is something that I hear quite often too. I think it is important to really check in with yourself and see, is it fear that is really rushing you, or is it something that is coming from a more healthier place? Because feeling rushed, obviously, there's fear associated with that, and maybe some other things. And making a decision based in fear is usually not the best way to make a decision. But the reality is, there could be a part of you that feels ready, and that could come from a very healthy place. But really checking in with yourself and maybe even doing some journaling around where that desire is coming from might help you. Well, I didn't see that first. If you feel that you know that in your being, then it's probably important to honor that. I had my last therapy before Christmas and always find it so hard. I want to let go and just really enjoy being able to talk to her, but it's so scary. I'm terrified of needing her. Is that boundary okay? Jack, this is such a relevant thing. And thank you for actually being able to say that out loud, theoretically out loud. This is something that so many people struggle with when they are working with a therapist. And it can feel kind of embarrassing or shameful to acknowledge that desire or need is there, but it's natural. And there are a lot of reasons that I could talk for hours about, but it is completely natural to have some uncertainty and fear around that. So what I'm taking from what you've said here, Jack, is that last therapy session before Christmas. So I'm assuming here that you will be returning after the holidays. So from that perspective, honoring how you're feeling. Like, one of the things that can come up is actually feeling abandoned. Now, a logical part of you can be very clear in recognizing that you're not actually being abandoned, but the wounded part of you, and that wounded part could be present for anybody, regardless of history, but certainly for anybody who's experienced childhood trauma or dysfunction, even chaos. It's very natural to have the fear of being abandoned, or an experience within our being of being abandoned, come up. Because that's coming from a place that is not conscious. Particularly when you've been vulnerable, when you've opened yourself up, when you've allowed somebody to witness parts of yourself, even just in vulnerability, that maybe you don't really allow other people to see. That's incredibly vulnerable. And when you've allowed yourself to be vulnerable with somebody, and then you know that they're not there, it can feel like you've been abandoned, or it can bring up a lot of fear that they're not going to be there on the other side. If you haven't done this, and again, assuming that you will resume after the holidays, being able to talk about that is really important, because it's not just about not seeing that person for these couple of weeks. It's about something much deeper. So being able to talk about that, being able to talk about what thoughts, what fears came to mind, can really be helpful for healing. So the reality is that we all need connection. Every single one of us, even for those of you who say, no, I don't need to be connected to anybody. I'm independent, or I can do this on my own. Yes, you can do things on your own without any doubt. And I was one of those people who believe that. But the truth is that to be a healthy human, we do need connection. And we can only have connection with another human being. And for many people, the therapist is the person that they feel kind of safest with, in a sense, because this is one of the reasons why a therapist is helpful, because in that relationship, hopefully, you know, maybe even have experienced that that is a safe space for you, that you can feel whatever you feel, you can talk about whatever you talk about, and there's no judgment. That your therapist isn't going to say, well, yeah, wait till you hear what happened to me, or throw it in your face when you have an argument, or whatever it may be. So for many people, the therapist is their space to just kind of be and let everything go. Having, excuse me, feeling like you're craving that or you want that, especially if there's going to be some time that you don't have it, when you're used to having it on a regular basis, it's going to bring up a lot of stuff. So being able to, again, honor that that's what you're feeling, that you're missing that. One of the things that I hear people say often is that, like if we're not meeting during a week, whether it's because they're doing something or I'm doing something or whatever, is that they feel a lot of feelings come up during the time that we would normally meet, or leading up to that time, and knowing that we're not going to be meeting. And so they start feeling different kinds of things. That's normal, because it's a reminder, is that person really going to be there? What if this person leaves a practice or decides not to work with me anymore? Lots of different things can come up. So one of the things that I tell people, and so Jack, this might be helpful for you or for anybody else, during the time that you would normally meet with your therapist, being very intentional about still carving out that time and doing something for yourself. So really thinking about what that could look like. Maybe it's doing something that you really wanted to do. Maybe it's giving yourself time to take a nap. Maybe setting that time aside and connecting with a friend, but being very intentional about what you might do with that time and somehow nourishing yourself during that time. That can be really helpful. Sometimes if it feels particularly challenging or painful, maybe you do something intentional to really distract yourself from it. And any of those things I mentioned would likely be a distraction from it. But taking care of yourself. So there's nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong with feeling it, nothing wrong with wanting it, nothing wrong with struggling with having time off. But I think it is helpful to be able to talk about when you do come back together. If you've completed sessions before the holiday and you're afraid of feeling a need come up through the holidays or after, that's kind of a little bit of a different thing. But in that case, ending therapy, people often struggle with feeling a little bit of almost panic, in a sense of, what if I need something? What if I can't do this on my own? How is it going to feel to not have that consistent support or place to talk things through or whatever? If you're ending therapy, but you haven't had a chance to talk about those things yet, I actually think it might be beneficial to have another session to talk about those things. because that's a natural part of the stuff that comes up when you're terminating therapy. And ideally, you would have an opportunity to talk about some of those things that are likely going to come up and some of the fears that may be there, and even having kind of a plan in place if something does come up. So, Jack, that may not be relevant to you in your situation, but it might be something helpful for somebody else to hear. As long as you don't break into your therapist's house. Yes, that would not be good. Let's see. Sorry, I lost track here where I am. Sweden. I love seeing people from all over the place. Christmas always brings up so much sadness and grief to a lot of survivors' experiences. There's a question there. So yes, I think there's a question. Yes, for a lot of different reasons, but survivors of childhood difficulty, particularly trauma, but any significant difficulty, holidays can often be very challenging for a number of reasons. Yeah, any memories that are associated with the holidays, because one of the reasons why the holidays can be kind of a reminder or even a trigger is because kind of what I was saying earlier on about, like, it's everywhere, right? Like if you have, say for example, an abuser's birthday, like a lot of people, they think about their abuser and their birthday and it can bring up stuff. But the whole world isn't talking about your abuser's birthday. So it may not be quite as challenging to get through, because you could talk to a friend and a friend may not know, and it may not be part of your conversation. You're not going around and seeing signs everywhere that it's your abuser's birthday. But with the holidays, this time of year, holidays especially, it's everywhere. And there are so many different holidays right now, that different religions and stuff that people are celebrating. And it starts like at Halloween. So it's months of being reminded of this time of year. So there are reminders everywhere. So this type of time of year can be particularly challenging. So even if there's nothing bad that happened this time of year, but maybe because of boundaries, maybe you're not connected to the people that you miss, because they're not healthy to be around. For example, the dad situation earlier. Well, during this time of year, people are talking about their families and they're talking about, being excited about seeing people, and songs and advertisements talking about the people that you love and family and how great it is. So it's a constant reminder that is not what your family looks like, that is not your reality. So it really can be a reminder of all kinds of stuff that doesn't feel good. What if the only person you have allowed moments of genuine connection without your mask on is your therapist? Is it okay to think of that connection energetically, or is that a bit weird or creepy? It is not weird or creepy. It's normal. And I think that, anybody who's followed me for any length of time, that I talk about that we can really only heal in the context of a relationship, that we need connection. And the reality is we are going to feel most connected to the people who we've allowed to actually see us without the mask. Because if people only see our mask or see us under the mask, so they're not seeing the fullness of who we are, all of who we are, then any support that we feel from them doesn't get internalized, because we know that, or what we say to ourselves is that what they're supporting is the mask. They're supporting who we're projecting, who we want them to believe we are. Now, that doesn't mean they're not actually seeing the truth of who we are. But if we know that we're wearing a mask, then we can say to ourselves, but they wouldn't support me if they knew this. Or they wouldn't feel this way if they knew that I felt this. So the only way we can truly feel a connection is when we have allowed someone to see beyond that mask. And for many people, that is their therapist. And even for some people with their therapist, they haven't yet allowed that to happen. But for those who the therapist is that person or the primary person, allowing yourself to reconnect with that, especially if you're not going to be seeing that person, allowing yourself to reconnect with that is actually very healthy. Kind of what I was saying just a few moments ago, and I can't remember which comment it was. I think it was about the last session before Christmas, being able to kind of remind yourself of what that feels like. That's important. And if you've had experiences like that with other people, again, being able to remind yourself of what that feels like is important and healing in that moment. So it's not weird or creepy at all. But, it is interesting, though, that I think a lot of people, kind of like what Jack said, is it didn't want to cross a boundary, like there's an idea that there's something wrong with that we shouldn't need it, or if we want it, then somehow we're weak, or that it's not okay in some way. But allowing ourselves to feel that connection, allowing ourselves to lean on somebody is an important part of the healing process. Because you've already done the other thing, right? Where you've not leaned on anybody, where you have told yourself, I can do this on my own and I don't need anybody, and letting somebody in is dangerous. But that probably hasn't really helped you do any healing, has it? It may feel safer, but it hasn't actually helped you heal. So that connection, allowing that connection to happen, is where the healing happens. My mother still refuses to honor my boundaries. She sees me as weak and overreacting, attention-seeking. I've had to learn to accept this and move on with my healing. Michelle, I'm sorry to hear this, but please know that you're not alone. It's not just your mother. Therefore, it's not just you. And it's not you that's causing your mother to not honor your boundaries. Parents often can be the most challenging people to set boundaries with, or to have honor your boundaries. And part of that is the nature of child-parent relationship, but there can be a lot of other reasons for that as well. Oftentimes when people are not honoring our boundaries, it's because they're not wanting to deal with something. So try to keep that in mind too, that it's not personal. And the reality is that when we are working on healing, when we're trying to be healthy, there are going to be a lot of people who are not happy about setting boundaries, about us setting those boundaries. And they will call us names. They'll say that we're being rude or disrespectful or dishonoring the family and stuff like that. But that's unfortunately a very natural thing for people to do, to push back against your boundaries, because in doing that, they're anticipating, and this doesn't happen consciously generally, but in doing that, they are anticipating that you will give in. Maybe that's what you've done in the past, and maybe not, but generally people are used to pushing against that, just like children, right? When you're trying to set rules with children naturally push back, especially if you haven't had those rules before. They naturally push back to see how far they can push. And if you back off, then they're eventually going to realize that they can get what they want. They just have to keep pushing. But then when it comes to adults in our lives, it doesn't matter how much we try to stand up for that, they're just going to keep pushing. They're not ever going to really be able to honor that. And then it becomes a matter of redefining what that boundary looks like for you. And the truth is that redefining that boundary may have to look like not answering a call, blocking a number, even if it's only for a period of time. And I know that brings up a whole host of challenges that are really difficult. And maybe after the beginning of the year, sometime I will do a video on that. I was just thinking about the course and maybe doing a live group type thing. But sorry, my mind goes all over the place. But that sometimes that is what needs to happen. Boundaries are not easy. Boundaries, when we are working on healing or really having the healthiest relationship with ourselves or other people, boundaries are often the most challenging thing, because it's not just work we have to do within ourselves, it's work we have to do with other people. Even if they're not honoring it, just having to continue to maintain that boundary takes a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of self-talk, reminding yourself that you are worthy of that boundary and not to feel guilty or ashamed about it. So it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do that. Colleen, yes. Michelle, Colleen wrote, maybe you've seen this, if your mom finds it easy to find fault with you, it keeps her from having to look at herself and see the possibility of the part she might play. I think that's very true. That can absolutely be part of what happens. This keeps jumping. I really like my therapist. However, she shut me down when I told her that I want to name my babies to gain some sort of closure. She shut me down, told me that I need to cut the cords and let go of them. She said that they will hold me back from moving forward. I'm not sure if I can trust her anymore. It felt like she dismissed my feelings and projected hers on mine. I'm viewing this out of pain and not a sound mind. Sharon, I think that, it is, obviously I don't know the situation. So what I'm saying is just based on ideas. It is possible that you may have interpreted something in a way that wasn't what she intended. That could very well be possible. What you're saying could also be possible, that maybe she's projecting something onto you. It could be that in her belief system, however it became what it is, that's how you deal with grief. I think what is important is, how does it feel to you? If it doesn't resonate for you, then I think that's important to honor. What I would say, if you have had a good relationship with your therapist, if you have felt safe with her, I would encourage you. Now, again, I don't know her and I don't really know you either, in a solid way. But generally, so this is a general statement, what I think could be helpful is letting her know how you feel. Letting her know that doesn't feel at all resonant for you, that doesn't feel like how you want to grieve and move on. The reality is, with any grief, with any loss, we don't move on. We have to grieve. We have to. That is the only way to get to the other side of it. So again, if you've had a good relationship with her, I think it may be helpful to share with her for two reasons. One, in case there is a misunderstanding of what was said or meant, because it would be terrible to end a relationship that has meant something to you if it is about a misunderstanding. But I also think that it could strengthen your relationship. If it was a good relationship, it could potentially strengthen your relationship if you're able to go back to her and say, I've been thinking about what you said and it really didn't feel good to me, or it made me think about not seeing you anymore, or whatever it is. That actually can be really healthy. Well, it is healthy, and can actually be helpful in the context of healing and the relationship. Now, obviously, if she doesn't receive that well, then I would agree that it may be time to move on. But the reality is, when it comes to grief, there is no right way. Everybody moves through it in their own way. But sometimes when we are significantly grieving, sometimes we can make decisions that are not necessarily coming from a solid rooted foundation, but can come from the need to move on, in a sense, a need to avoid feeling what we're feeling. And I'm not saying that that's what's happening here, but I do know that that is the reality that a lot of people can experience with grief. And it can be grief around different things. I've had like people who have a break-in their home and immediately decide to move, even though they've loved that home and they never intended to leave that home. But like, you know what? No, I think I'm ready to go. And no, it's not really about the break-in, but I'm ready to go. And it could be that you're just ready to go. But I think it can be important too, especially if you intended to stay there forever, to give yourself a little bit of space to really go under all that is really very present, the kind of rough waves, in a sense, even if you feel like you found a way to ride them, but kind of going under to where the calm is, and check in with your inner knowing. Because underneath all that's happening, there is still an inner knowing. Your intuition is still there, but when there's a lot going on, it can be hard to know if that is intuition or if it's all this energy moving you in a particular direction. And I don't have the answer to that. And it really can be either one. So, but I'm saying that just to help you understand that there may be more of what she was saying or trying to say that maybe she didn't verbalize very well. Sharon, I'm not sure if you've seen Isabella's comment here. I found that naming my babies and having a wee ceremony where I floated some flowers down a river really helped. I still have small stones from that river. I think that honoring your grief is important. I agree with Isabella. Isabel, thank you for sharing that, Isabel. Oh, good. Fortunately, it is just a break for the holidays. Yeah, I do think it's important to be able to talk about, but there's a lot of healing that can happen in talking about that, and not just healing in terms of your relationship with her or him. I don't know if you said specifically, but actual healing within yourself that can happen in that too. There's somebody that has, oh, there we go. So there's somebody on here new that I'm not sure who it is. Still grieving from the sexual abuse in childhood. Yes, there is so much grief that we have to be able to move through. So not move on from, but move through when it comes to healing childhood trauma. So much grief. And part of the reason that there is so much grief is because there's grief around so many different pieces of the experience and our lives, not just at the time, but going forward. There's so much grief that we have to be able to grieve as part of the healing. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of people will say, well, I've been to therapy and it didn't really help. I think there are a few reasons why that can happen. But one of the reasons that I've seen that happens for a lot of people is that isn't part of the healing. Oftentimes healing around, well, anything, I suppose, but trauma, sometimes it's really kind of a focus on symptoms, kind of being able to alleviate the symptoms or the triggers or whatever. And obviously that's important, but healing is far more than that. And grief is a very significant part of that. And as you grieve, this is an interesting part of it. As you grieve, you will notice that the grief can kind of branch out, and you recognize that there's even more grief that is there. Now, it's important to keep in mind what I said there. You'll notice that there is more grief. It doesn't mean that more comes to your life to grieve, because you've already been dealing with all of that is already there. You just haven't been aware that you've been dealing with it. And maybe your way of dealing with it is denying it, but it's still there. So it doesn't mean that when you start grieving that you will find more experiences to bring into grief. It just means that you will become more aware of exactly how much loss you've been experiencing, which again is one of the reasons why it's important to be working with somebody, because we really can't do that on our own. And nor should we do that on our own. You deserve to not have to do that on your own. It's hard to risk letting anyone in when you have always been fiercely independent. It feels childish and a bit weak. It is not weak, and it is not childish. But I think that is a very common idea that people have. I've said this before, but that fierce independence, and so for those of you who may not know, I did a video on, I don't remember the title of it, but something along the lines of how being independent can keep you from healing or something like that. There's a reason that we don't rely on other people, why we are fiercely independent. And that's about coping. It's about trying to protect ourselves. But it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel free. It doesn't feel connected. It certainly doesn't feel joyful. It's no way to live our lives, because we are, as humans, social beings. And I don't mean like extroverted and out having a great time all the time. I mean that we need connection. Allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to risk that connection in our adult lives is the most courageous thing that you can do. It truly is. Letting somebody else see you, the real you, not the mask, is incredibly vulnerable. That takes strength, and it takes courage. There is nothing weak about it. Okay, so just going through Always backed down and had to work hard to find my voice. Yes. And the thing about family, when it's not been a particularly healthy family, even if they're not honoring boundaries, that's not healthy. But with families that are not particularly healthy, when we are around them on an emotional level, we kind of revert back to the time in our life developmentally when we were most wounded. So, for example, like again, at the holidays, people will often say, when I get together with my family, it's just the same thing over and over again. Part of the reason it's the same thing over and over again is because each person coming back together is showing up on an emotional level at the age that they were when they were most wounded. And that's a general statement, but that is a good way to think about it. So, and that includes parents. So they're showing up with their own wounds, but then they're also showing up in the context of any wounding that may have happened in this relationship. And I don't necessarily mean that they were wounded in this relationship, but maybe if you were wounded or a really stressful time in the relationship. And parents have a hard time letting go of the parenting role, no matter how old their children get. And maybe I'm projecting a little bit there. And that is true. But I struggle with that as well. So we keep kind of repeating a lot of the same things over and over again. And it can be really hard to set boundaries or to enforce boundaries, because when we come back together with our families, we often feel developmentally like we're 5 or 8 or 10 or 2 or whatever it may be. So literally it is quite challenging to be able to be fully present in our adult selves in those times. So let's see. I've tried to cut back a lot on the things and spending time with people that overwhelm me. Now, though, I just feel completely empty and missed connection. Could it just be that I need more time? Jack, this is one of the kind of dichotomies of this process, is that even when we spend time with people that, even if we don't necessarily feel good about it, like we feel drained or we feel worse about ourselves or whatever, it's still in our mind and sometimes even in our body, it feels like it's okay. Might even feel like something we crave because that's what we're used to. And it feels better than the alternative, which can feel very isolating and lonely. And we have the idea that this is better than this. When we start recognizing, you know what, this isn't very healthy. I actually don't feel very good when I'm around these people, or I leave feeling even worse about stuff. That's an important recognition to have. And it does take time to recognize that this, like missing them, feeling like maybe it is better to be with them, even if it's not healthy or doesn't feel good, it does take time for that to shift. Because this is what you're used to. And any habit that we're used to is a break, right? What can be helpful when you are in this space and you're feeling like you're missing somebody, or it's better than the alternative, being with them is better than the alternative. What can be helpful is reminding yourself that this is part of the process, that it's okay to miss them, but that you're also taking care of yourself, that you can feel the sense of loneliness, or you can feel like you're missing out or whatever, and you can be okay feeling those things, and that ultimately you will feel better. And the other thing too, when we stop putting energy into relationships and people that don't feel good, that aren't honoring our boundaries, that we just take a lot of energy or we feel not great afterwards, when we're not putting so much energy there, it does give us the space to heal a little bit. It gives us space to have that time to recognize, yeah, I miss them, but boy, it sure does feel good to not have to worry, or it really does feel good to not question myself so much. And that starts to feel a little bit more real. And then you have the space and energy and awareness to start connecting with people who fill you up versus drain you. And that's one of the pieces of boundaries in general, and kind of working through honoring your boundaries and acknowledging your boundaries, setting your boundaries and enforcing your boundaries. That's all part of that process. But it is natural to feel that. And it sometimes, maybe there's a person who within that setting that maybe is okay to connect with for a brief period of time. Setting a boundary doesn't necessarily have to mean completely cutting somebody out, though sometimes that is important. Sometimes it can be a boundary about, okay, I'm not going to respond to a text just because it comes in. I'll wait until I feel ready to respond, or I'm not going to look at the text until I feel like I have the capacity or the desire to do that. It could be limiting the amount of time. So there's lots of ways that we can set boundaries that don't necessarily require completely cutting people out, but that also takes practice as well. And it really is a practice. It's not just a decision we make and then we do it. It really is a practice we have to do. And when those people push back, as we were talking about earlier, when those people push back, it can bring up lots of stuff, which again, why it's important to be able to ideally work with somebody as you're trying to navigate those boundaries. And this has really made me think that when I do release sacred boundaries as the course, that it might be helpful to maybe do like a workshop around it. So what I mean by that is maybe having like a Zoom workshop that's maybe a couple of hours or so, where we come together, for anybody who wants to take sacred boundaries, come together and we can kind of talk about some of the different things that are coming up. I can kind of walk you through some of that stuff. If you're interested in possibly taking sacred boundaries and that feels interesting to you, you can let me know, whether you're watching this live or on replay, and I will look into the possibility of maybe doing that maybe sometime in January or maybe even February. So it'd be like maybe one Zoom call, 2-3 hours, or maybe a couple of Zoom calls. I don't know. We can kind of figure that out. I'll think about it a little bit more. And by the way, Sacred Boundaries is a fairly brief course. It's some videos, some Q&A, some videos where I'm kind of teaching, and a PDF workbook with some journal prompts and practices to help you honor your own needs and desires in setting boundaries, and kind of some things to help practice setting some of those boundaries. And that will be coming hopefully soon. I think that I have responded to everything here. If I haven't, excuse me. If you've written something or a particular question that I haven't responded to, please, if you could share it again, that would be helpful. But I think that I have addressed everything. Okay. I'm so glad you all have joined me today. Oh, good, Jack. I'm glad to hear it. So it's not on my website yet, but it will be. I will. If you haven't signed up for my newsletter, anybody who's watching this, if you haven't signed up on my website, I would encourage you to do so. Let me share this link. You can sign up for my newsletter, and anytime that I'm doing something, usually even these live videos, or often with these live videos, I will share that I'm doing them as well. I'll ask for feedback often too from my newsletter, people on who receive my newsletter, sorry, about what I might offer. So if you haven't signed up, I would encourage you to do so, just so that you know what to expect and what's going on, and help me understand what might be beneficial to create for you or to talk about. But I will be sharing that with my newsletter, and I'll also be sharing it on social media, and I'm sure I'll probably share it here too when it's ready. So if there's nothing else, if you are watching this on replay, please share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know that you've watched. So thank you again, everybody. And as we close, whether you were here in the beginning or not, as we close, I would just encourage you to kind of come back to the idea of feeling that energetic connection, especially as you've connected with some of the people as they've shared here, maybe learned a little bit about somebody. Just really letting yourself feel that energetic connection that we've created in this space together, because that carries beyond this time that we're sharing here in this moment. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and I will look forward to seeing you very soon. Wishing you all a very happy holiday, a very inspired, connected, and peaceful new year. I probably will not see you until after the beginning of the year, but who knows, maybe I'll pop in sometime in between. But really wishing you all a very peaceful, happy holiday and a very happy new year. See you soon. Oh, wait, there's a question here. I set a very clear boundary with someone not to message me unless it was kind. They ignored that, so now I need to be firm in my boundary. It is painful. Any tips? It is painful. And again, grief. So, I mentioned how grief pops up here. Grief is a part of this. Betrayal is a part of that. Reminding yourself that, so when somebody isn't honoring your boundary and you're making a very clear boundary with that and saying, okay, no more. Reminding yourself that what you're doing is healthy. Reminding yourself that the boundary that you have set, just asking somebody to be kind or to not be unkind, like that's a boundary that we should all be willing to respect, isn't it? To not say mean or hurtful things, to not be rude or disrespectful. Shouldn't we be able to expect that from everybody? All of us? Shouldn't we have an expectation within ourselves to be that way with other people? Anybody watching this, I'm sure that you do. So if we ask somebody to not be unkind and they don't honor that, it's a very healthy thing to do, to not allow that to happen anymore. As painful as it is, especially when it's somebody that you deeply love. And even when it's not, it's also painful and scary. But it's never okay for people to be unkind. We can forgive them if they ask for forgiveness and we feel that it's meaningful. And we can maintain a relationship under those types of circumstances, as long as it doesn't continue to repeat itself, because that's not healthy. But that is the reality. So the biggest thing, the biggest tip, so to speak, would be reminding yourself that you've done nothing wrong, that it is healthy, and that somebody who chooses to not honor the boundary of simply just being kind, because that's not a very challenging boundary to try to give to somebody. I think it's a completely reasonable boundary to try to set. If they're unwilling to do that, then I'm guessing that you would encourage other people to set that boundary too. So just keep reminding yourself that that boundary is healthy, that if somebody is unwilling to honor that boundary, then it proves that that boundary really needs to be set. I know it's not easy. So practicing a lot of self-compassion, staying connected, those things are really important. Sorry. Michelle, how exciting! Your book arrives in the post tomorrow. Yay, Michelle, I would love, so this is the first time I'm hearing that somebody actually knows when they're going to get it. I've had some issues with distribution, which is why I'm not really talking about it, because I'm trying to resolve it before I keep encouraging people to buy it. Oh, Michelle, that's so exciting. I hope it shows up. And please feel free. I would love to hear what you think about it. Any feedback that you have, feel free to send me an email. I don't know if you are on social media or not, but if you are, I would love if you share it. You can tag me in it. That's so exciting. I know that quite a few have been sold, but I know that there's been some delays in people getting it, but that's really exciting to hear. So actually before Christmas, everything that I was hearing, people were saying that it wasn't going to arrive until after the holiday. So exciting. Good. All right. Well, I'd love to hear from you. healing@courageousjourneys.com. You can comment wherever, but tag me, or you can send me an email. Yes, that would be great. All right, so I will look forward to seeing you all in the new year, if not before. But please take care of yourself, practice lots of self-care. Remember to honor yourself, your feelings, your emotions, your relationships, yourself over these next couple of weeks. Sharon, yes, I am going to be doing an audio version. There's some things I need to learn about before I can do it, but I am in the process of trying to learn all that. But I will be definitely doing an audio version, hopefully soon. I don't know how long it actually takes to complete it, but I will be doing that very soon. I'm glad, Isabel. All right, so again, happy holidays, everybody. Practice lots of self-care and lots of self-compassion. I will look forward to seeing you in the new year. Bye.